Hello everyone, I'm Ramona and welcome to the premiere episode of Mo Presents Fun with Test. Side note, Mo is a nickname of me, but I don't want to joke around that much. Let's get serious. I'm a developer at Shopware, which is a company providing an open source e-commerce system for you to use for an online shop. Despite being a developer at Shopware, I have more than 5 years experience in quality assurance. So I know both views of the product, that of a tester and that of a developer. So my goal is to make the experience for both of them better, for developer experience and tester experience alike. And so I brought you some little stories about my experience, my career, about traps. So please let me welcome you at this session, at my session at Frontend Test Fest. I am so glad that you spent your time with me here and that you want to learn about all the things I messed up. Yeah, I know that sounds harsh, but it is what it is. And I hope to learn from my past mistakes together with you all here in this session. And yeah, I'm so glad to do that with you here. So let's begin. There are a couple of movies I loved watching as I was a child. And now, as an adult, I love to rewatch them numerous times, lots of times, not only because of nostalgia. There's one quote in particular from a movie, which sticks into my mind a lot, even when it comes to testing. It's from the 1983 movie Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. It's the quote, "It's a trap." And well, I know, I'm not that good in mimicking it. Like, for example, Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory or basically anybody. But this memorable quote was said by Admiral Akbar, who is the leader of the Mon Calamari rebels. It was said during the Battle of Endor, where the aliens mobilized its forces in a concerted effort of destroying the Death Star. And Admiral Akbar encounters an unexpected ambush while doing that, leading him to exclaim, "It's a trap." And you could say now, well, okay, that's a nice quote, even became a meme back in the days. But what does it have to do with testing, especially? Well, in my opinion, it's a nice allegory when it comes to testing. And yes, testing has so many perks and advantages, and I don't think I need to convince you about that testing is awesome and testing saves our lives and all of these things. But this value, these perks can be outshadowed though by pain points caused by various reasons and various things. Many of those traps can be considered traps, okay, that it's something that feels like an ambush or an imminent danger. Things you did in your best intent, but turning out painful or exhausting or annoying in the long run, or even earlier if we are not that fortunate. Well, there are especially 3 pain points which were coming back to me again and again when I think about traps. Especially when I look at my origin and my time as a tester, or the first legacy code I wrote years ago. First being slow tests. This is quite easy, isn't it? Well, think about a feature you built, a task you did, something you're very proud of, and you want it to be merged, you want it to be released, and that users are working with your feature. But you need to wait hours or even days for the pipeline to be executed. This is really annoying, trust me. Another pain point is, for me personally, are tests which are painful to maintain or to debug. For example, let it be this good old test I don't understand now when looking at it a month later. Or fellow developers asking me what I wanted to achieve with this old test, and I don't know what to answer. Or a test result where I look into the log entries and I don't know why it was failing. Well, in general, reading through lots of codes, classes, abstractions can be really exhausting and in the worst case lead to plain chaos. But we aren't done now. Last but not least, I want to talk to you about tests who give you no value, no clear result at all. You may call them Heisen fails or Heisen tests if you want. It's like the famous Heisenbug, which only occurs if you look away, measuring things, or in our case, don't debug things. Well, when it comes to the end boss, the final opponent of us in this Heisenbugs, it's the Flaky Test. It's an undetermined test. Tests who fail to deliver the same correct result in between builds. You didn't change anything at all in them, and they still show other values as you thought. But don't be worried about that, because it don't have to be that way. Tests and their handling, working with tests, writing tests, debugging tests can be really much fun. We just need to keep our eye and our attention on some things. Much can be done by preventing this pain in the first place, or if damage is done, by refactoring your legacy code base or something like that. I brought you some little traps and some possible solutions, but in order to get them in the right way, I need to give you a little bit of context. In my daily business at Shopware, I use Jest for unit testing and Cypress framework for end-to-end testing. So most of my code examples will be written in one of those frameworks. I try my best to stay on an abstract level so that you can use my advice for other frameworks as well. But if I fail in that, please come back to me at Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever you find me to talk about that so I can learn from you as well. One additional little disclaimer is that some examples of my talk are valid for all test types. May it be unit testing, integration testing, including API functional or component testing, or even end-to-end testing. So I try to have some examples which are valid universally. So I will state for which kind of test my example is valid when we are at the actual example. So you will see what I mean when I come to this. Okay. I want to begin with one most important thing when it comes to testing, and a certain mindset I want you to remember when it comes to my talk. Let's look at one situation first you might be familiar with. You build a feature, you are interested in your feature, and you are proud of it, and you are focused. But it is something you need to think about, to be concentrated on. So your brain is full with main production code, and you don't have any headspace left for additional complexity, especially not for testing. And there shouldn't be any testing eating up your space in your head, because eating much headspace is against the intent of testing and can cause lots of harm to your team. Worst case, even causing your team to abandon testing if it feels like a burden. So the most important thing in testing, in my opinion, is best described by a quote by Uni Goldberg. I come to the quote later, but he defines it as a golden rule, and I totally agree to that it's the most important thing. And most of my upcoming example will pay in on this. It's keep it simple, stupid. It's about tests which should be designed plain simple in every case. And it doesn't matter if it's a unit or an end-to-end test. Tests shouldn't be treated like production code, because some best practices are unsuitable for tests at all. For example, if you think about duplicate code, duplication, even if you have duplicate code, you maybe should think about using it either way, because it's better to understand your test when you don't use any abstractions, or as less abstractions as you can. So pay attention to have a flat test design. Another important thing is that you need to test only as much as you need it. not keeping in any complexity, so that as a result, your test will be delightful to work with and not a burden. Our main goal in testing should be that, now is the quote by Uni Goldberg, one should look at a test and get its intent instantly. That's really important. Okay. Next step and first code example. Please look at this test. Especially look at the title I marked in teal color. The test itself is not that important, just the title. When you look at this test title, do you know what it wants to accomplish without thinking about it? Remember a golden rule. You should know instantly what it's doing, and just using a throw error as a title won't give me any context, anything at all. So how can we improve that? There's the 3-part rule by Roy Osherop, which will help you keeping your test clear and keeping clear what your test wants to cover and what to accomplish. It's well known from unit testing, but it's maybe not that bad to keep it in mind when it comes to end-to-end testing as well, because this way you will instantly see in your test log entries what the test was about. One moment, please. The test should contain 3 things according to that rule. A, what is being tested? In this case, it's the property which is being tested. B, under what circumstances and scenario should be tested? Like in this case, usage of the deprecated property. And C, what is the expected result? Well, in this case, the error is thrown. In this way, you instantly know what it's all about. Long cat, test name is long, and long cat likes long test titles. As it can see the result of the test in first sight, and has no need to read through all of the logs. All right. Next one. Look at this next test. Do you see and get it in first sight? If yes, you're actually quite good. And if not, that's okay. That's quite normal, as the test structure is a mess here. Declarations, assertions, and actions are written without consideration of order and without any structure to begin with. So how can we change this together so that we stick to our golden rule? We could use the AAA pattern, which is short for arrange, act, assert. Again, this pattern is familiar from unit testing, but I don't think it's so useful when it comes to end-to-end tests, as end-to-end tests tend to be a bit longer than unit testing. But either way, you structure your test in 3 parts. The first is arrange, where you can define your setup to bring the system to the scenario the test aims to simulate. I'm thinking about variables or all the stubbing, all the mocking you need to do for your test to function. Second part is the act. It's basically on running your unit under test, doing all the steps, all the actions, or whatever you need to get to your result state. The last part is assert, and that assert is quite self-explanatory. There you do your assertion and checks of your test scenario. And this way you have a neat little test, which is here designed in a lean way, easy to understand. Okay, next one. We're at the next step. And there I drew you some image. This image looks peaceful and happy. 2 people sharing one paper or something with the word data on it. However, there might be a rude awakening, or worse. Well, connect this image to a test. The 2 people are representing our tests, and the paper representing test data. This means that there are basically 2 tests sharing the same data, or even worse, 2 tests relying on a previous test to be executed. And this can be really problematic as it leads to flaky test. Think about if the previous test is failing or the test data is corrupted, none of the both tests will be able to be executed successfully. Or another case, if all tests are executed in a random order, both of them won't be successful. Or another case from unit testing, 2 tests which are mutilating the same seed data. All of those are situations you want to avoid. How can you avoid them? By making sure that your test is isolated and self-managed. In this case, I brought you an example from my test at Shopware, why I want to cover the customer login in the storefront of an online shop. Because I want to do my steps before each and every test, I'm using the before each hook. And the first step I always do is to reset my application to a clean installation. This way, I make sure that all the tests are using the same test data. And on the other hand, I am able to protect my test against all of the side effects or anything which can come outside of my test. The second step afterwards would be creating the data I need to run my test specifically for the test itself, being in the login like the creation of a customer by API or something like that. This way, my test can be executed independently and the order of my tests doesn't matter. Both of those measures isolate the test and making it more stable. So I really love to avoid those flaky traps with this strategy. Okay. At the next trap, we got some little guest here. It's BB8. And he found a name or a string which might be familiar to us as developers, but not for him. It's the foo bar string. And of course, we as developer know that foo bar is often used as a placeholder name. But imagine looking at a test of a fellow developer. If you read foo bar, do you instantly know what it stands for? Is it a product? Is it a customer name? Or is it whatever? I don't know. So again, this way your test might be more difficult to understand. So we should avoid using such not that meaningful names. Fortunately, fixing this is quite easy. Let's look at this Cypress test. It's an end-to-end test, but this advice is not limited to that. Basically, you can use it for all tests which are handling some names or string test data. This test here should check if a product can be created and read. Basic CRUD operation, if you want to say it like that. And in it, I want to use names and placeholders connected to a real product. Imagine like a t-shirt with the name T-shirt Akbar, or a manufacturer name like Space Company, or whatever. Anything which leads you to see that I'm dealing with a product. You could use Faker to generate data if you don't want to invent it yourself. Or even prettier, you could import it from your production state. You see, I want to stick to the golden rule even when it comes to naming. Okay. New trap, but it's the same test. Did you notice the selectors in it? They are CSS selectors. You might think, okay, what's wrong with those selectors? They are unique, they are easy to handle. Why shouldn't I use them? Because they are prone to change. Imagine if you refactor your styling of this website or use other class names, anything, and the selectors aren't there anymore. Your test might fail even if you didn't introduce a bug. And this could be a problem. As Yoda says, look at selectors you must. And that's true because a test failing without a bug is a false positive, giving no reliable report on the application state, as there's nothing wrong. It's just outdated, no? In other circumstances, it might apply to unit testing as well if you're using selectors in a component test or something when you use jest or similar. But in this case, of course, I refer mainly to an end-to-end test. Basically, it's important to keep in mind that you shouldn't test implementation details. But you can counter that. You can avoid that by Using things a user would call attention to or a user would see or work with when it comes to the application. Cypress brings a neat little command here, it's called contains, which checks for a string to be available on your website. So that might be a good idea. Another one, using selectors which are less prone to change. My favorite being data attributes. A developer won't be changing those data attributes that often as he would when using class names. Well, on all those things, on all those issues of testing implementation detail, Kent wrote a wonderful article which I can recommend you to read. So let's get further to the next trap. And it's one I cannot stress enough. I know I may be annoying to you when I'm talking about this trap, but I need to introduce it here as well because I know, at least in my team, there are still developers who do that. So I won't stop talking about it. It's about fixed waiting times. You see this little line with the wait for half a second marked in teal. And even worse, it's inside a command I use a lot when it comes to my test suite. As a result, it will slow down the test way too much. And this is not necessary at all. So I don't like to do that. It's annoying. And there's not even the worst case. Worst case being waiting too less time, causing flakiness because our test is more faster than our website to react. So you don't want to debug that. You don't want to deal with that. Trust me. Fortunately, there's plenty of things to do to avoid those fixed waiting times. Well, all of this ways center around dynamically waiting for things. I advise you to prefer more deterministic ways or methods that most of testing platforms provide. I want to show you two of my favorite and one I heard about but didn't use it that much. The first possibility is to wait for changes in the UI, like a normal user would do. For example, wait for loading spanner to disappear, for animation to stop, or for text to be loaded, or anything a user could see. Another thing which I want to show you in a short abstract, fortunately, is to wait for API requests. Cypress provides you a neat little feature for that, and I really love it because Shopware is API first, so there are plenty of requests and responses to wait for, and this way I can wait efficiently for data to appear in my application. Of course, you need some more lines to, for example, define the route you want to wait for, but it's easily found in Cypress documentation, and if you got questions concerning that, please come back to me at any time. Well, with all those measures, there's one third possibility you might think about. It's about hurrying up the clock. Use timer functions, but to be honest, I didn't use it that much yet. With all that being said, this way your test will stay stable and reliable at one time, while being able to manage the time efficiently in the other hand. So your test will stay fast like this bad boy here. Okay, coming back to Star Wars. Coming back to Admiral Akbar. The Battle of Endor turned out to be a success, even when it was a bit of a work to do. It was a success with teamwork and a couple of measurements. Please refer that to testing again. It might be a lot to do for you, even if the damage is done and you have a huge legacy code base. You might need to refactor a lot, or if you start a new project, you might need a change in mind when it comes to test design. But trust me, it is worth it in the end, and you will feel the rewards. Being a more happy team or being more confident in your releases. All right. If there's one thing I want you to remember of my talk, then it's the golden rule. All examples, or at least most of the examples, pay in on that, and all pain points emerge from ignoring it. Please keep in mind that a test should be a friendly assistant to you, no hindrance. It should guide you, it should be there for you, but it shouldn't annoy you or make you tired. Tests should feel like a routine for you, not like solving a complex mathematical formula or anything eating up your precious headspace. Let's give our best to achieve that so developer experience and testers experience can be a good one and a good experience for anybody in your team. See, R2D2 is catching bugs with ease here. And I want you to feel like that as well, so that dealing with tests, writing tests, debugging tests, anything with tests feels lean and like fun to you. So that you can be confident and, in a good mood when it comes to this testing topic. I hope I was able to give you some ideas on the most common pitfalls I myself encountered. But of course, there will be a lot more of them, which I wasn't able to cover here in this talk. So I'd be so glad if you can share the pitfalls, the traps, the pains, anything you encountered, so that I can learn from you and other people can learn from you and we can discuss and just get to know more of this topic. There are some wonderful articles and resources on this topic as well. So I would love to share them with you after this talk when I share my slides to you. All right. What else can I say then? Thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening to me. If you got questions, feel free to reach out to me after this talk at the conference, at Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you find me. I would be glad to talk with you about this topic or about testing in general. Until then, see you.
Hey, awesome work on that talk. Thank you so much, Ramona. That was awesome. I love any talk that references awesome TV shows and sci-fi, so that was great.
Thank you.
Also, I think many people in the chat were enamored with your slides. They were beautiful, so awesome work on those as well.
Really, thank you so much. Everyone of you.
Yeah. No, I was very actively taking notes, being just like the whole arrange, act, assert. And I really love that statement you made at the end where a test should be a friendly assistant to you, not a hindrance. I think that's amazing and a really good reminder as you're writing everything.
Yeah, the most important thing in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have quite a few questions to get through, so we'll have to start and hopefully we can get to all of them. Okay. So first of all, the first question that we have here is what is flat test design?
Well, when I want to explain it to my colleagues, I love to use the word minimalistic as something like a tip or something. When I'm talking about flat test design, I want to give you the impression to use as less as possible and as much as you need. Think about the extent of your test. If you are waiting, like a bad example, all the things you need for your workflow to test as some kind of manual clicking things and commands and doing anything and blowing up your test in a kind of way, it will be difficult for others to get the intent of your test instantly. So try to only use the workflow you want to test in your test itself. If we are speaking on a Cypress test, I'm thinking about the it function. This would be the test in this case. Anything else, what you need should be created or added via a shortcut where API or anything you don't need to click for. When I think about a checkout process, for example, I need a project, I need a customer in my web shop or something like that. And I just want to test the workflow of the checkout. So I want to add the customer and the product beforehand before each shop, for example. So if I'm looking at my test, I know that if it fails, the error is inside of the test and nothing other than the checkout process.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that. Another one of the questions, and this is the most upvoted question we have here. Could you expand on your comment that we should avoid using abstractions?
Oh yeah, I know that this question would come up, and I love to discuss about that. Of course, there are two sides which are a bit of in conflict with one another. One, having a test which is easy to read, easy to understand, even for non-developers. And on the other side, the amount of maintenance you get if you are having lots of duplication in it. And in my opinion, I favor the first side just because of the fact that we have lots of testers and non-developers writing tests, and I want to make it as easy as possible for them. But of course, I'm agreeing to an extent when it comes to abstraction. So I'm using commands, I'm using helpers to not get into this maintenance hell when it comes to duplicate code all along. So I know it's the most favorite answer of everyone, but it depends. And unfortunately, in this case, that's really the case.
Gotta love the "it depends" answer.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
you mentioned no, it's true though, and I think it's a sign of a developer who has experienced a lot of this if they have to say "it depends" as a response.
Yeah.
You did mention a lot of traps and stuff. What was probably the most annoying trap that you yourself fell into?
Maybe you noticed my mood when it comes to one trap. It was the fixed waiting time trap, because it caused me lots of pain at my at the start of my testing career. I was working with the PHP framework to write end-to-end tests. It was Mink and Behead, so basically Selenium. And I thought it would be a nice and simple way to wait for things, for animations or whatever you think about, and not waiting dynamically. And yeah, the flakiness was incoming and it was huge. And yeah, it was, if I'm honest, it was hell to be in. And so I always annoyed people with the fact that they have to wait dynamically, and it doesn't matter if it's a change in the UI, API responsive, which is my favorite, or anything which is not fixed sleep time or something like that, because you don't want to debug those flakiness issues.
Yeah, for sure. You talk about flakiness and the way we've mentioned flakiness a bunch at this event, and it kind of reminds me of the Great British Baking Show, where they keep saying, "Oh, well, we want it to be perfectly this. We don't want any soggy bottoms." In this case, it's we don't want any flaky tests. Do you encounter flaky tests a lot? How do you overcome that? How do you kind of work around it? Do you have any examples?
Well, I think the first 3 years of my career, I encountered them a lot. Apart from those waiting time things, it was mainly some environmental cost issues. Think about cross dependencies between any npm packages, or even in Docker. Oh yes, in Docker, it was sometimes a bit painful. To name one example, I was working with a Nightwatch, and I don't want to say that Nightwatch is bad, but the way we used it was bad, in my humble opinion. We had the problem that if, for example, Google gives an update that our Nightwatch version or the WebDriver version couldn't be updated because of reasons. In this case, now I think no reason is important enough to prevent those updates, because those cross dependencies are a pain. And basically, I fixed them with using Cypress. Well, it's a bit not that creative, but it's the truth. Well, another thing was possibility. If you are dealing with end-to-end tests a lot, you need to keep your tests isolated, and therefore you need to choose a nice cleanup. And as Shopware, as an e-commerce platform, is API first, I thought it would be a good idea to use API requests to clean up in the after you took. until I noticed that it wasn't always the case that I was able to reach this hook, or that I really removed all the test data, which was conflicting with other tests, and again, flakiness. So, well, it took some time to figure that out. So don't do the same mistake as I did.
Oh man, that we've all had times like that. I guess speaking of Cypress and just kind of mocking up the different results that you might want to put in there. One question that has quite a few votes is for mocking database results. Should we be mocking database results in our front end tests?
Actually, that's like a dilemma. I hope that's the right word for it, at least for me, because mocking would solve a lot of problems at my side. But like I'm having a tester's background, I always try to write my test as close as possible to the customer or the user, which is who's using my software. So if I'm mocking a lot of things, I would go away from that, and I would, at the worst case, hide some errors a user would have in a real world environment. So I'm not quite sure if I prefer or don't like mocking that much. Maybe some other people have an opportunity to avoid this inner dilemma or something.
Yeah. And so another question that is similar but different for determining which tests need to be written for unit testing and component testing, even end-to-end testing, all of those. How do you determine when you need to write what?
Well, in this case, I try to avoid duplication at all costs. If I have a test case or a use case or a ticket, and I think, okay, what do I want to achieve with this test? Can I achieve it with a unit test in a better way? Then I prefer to use a unit test. To name a practical example, think about an error message. If you want to test the reaction of your application on this error message, please use an end-to-end test. But if you want to, for example, test the causes of this error message, like validations or what type of special letters can I use for this input field or anything like that, maybe a unit test is better suited. And besides that, when it comes to only end-to-end tests, I ask myself, okay, is this a workflow or a function a user will commonly use? So if he noticed any malfunction or something, would he most likely notice it or being prevented to use the application in a way you intended to be? If yes, I write an end-to-end test in every case. If not, I would challenge that. And the second criteria would be, I love to use this word critical path for it. Is this workflow something which shouldn't fail at any time because it would cause huge damage to the customer or to the user? For example, the checkout process, if you order something and something in the calculation is wrong, you definitely should test more in detail.
That makes a lot of sense. I think kind of having the modularity in mind as you decide what you want to test and where is really important. Would you say, like, in your own personal projects or in work and stuff, do you tend to prefer unit tests because of that and then end to end for other things, or do you not have a preference one over the other? I'm sure the answer is kind of, it depends.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. By just thinking spontaneously, I would say I tend to prefer unit testing because they are better to understand, they are faster, and they are not that dependent on the whole application stack. The more you need to be loaded, to be built or whatever, the more can go wrong. And especially me having experience with environmental flakiness, I tend to like unit tests just because of this fact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I loved what you mentioned in your talk on, first of all, how you have to refactor and make sure your test design is good, but having tests not depend on each other and isolate your test data and stuff, that's what I like the most about the unit testing side of things myself, because it's like it's in a vacuum. It's in a very clean environment, and if something goes wrong there, it's in that environment, not because of other factors.
That's so true, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Oh, there are so many. I'll say, friendly reminder, everyone, you can tweet her, and Ramona can answer your questions if you wouldn't mind dropping your handle in the chat afterwards.
Yeah, I would love to.
Anyway, yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you want your tests to run faster and more consistent, what would be your biggest tip for anybody who's writing all of this?
Well, there are plenty of things. First and foremost, dynamically waiting, because you just wait that much time as you need to. Use shortcuts whenever possible, like API requests, or maybe mocking if you are fine with moving a bit far away from the customer. What can I do? Try to use smaller tests when it comes to end-to-end testing because of the load they might cause. And play around with some cleanup strategies, because when it comes to my daily business, the cleanup is one of the most time-consuming things. It's basically using a MySQL dump, and I am totally not satisfied with that. So if anyone got any tips what I can use as an alternative, I'd be so happy.
Well, thank you so much again for your talk. We really, really appreciate it. There's tons of stuff in the chat, and I see that Olivia shared your handle already. But thank you so much again, Ramona.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.